and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hopkins, and today I'm going to be joined by somebody who I'm lucky enough to call, I guess a partner now here too. I get to work with from time to time. So Larry Sprung, a fantastic advisor, also runs his own podcast, which I can see, you've got the great branding behind you. So Larry, I'm super excited to have you on the show here today.
Yeah, Jamie, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here and always connect with you.
Yeah, I like it too. You've got your professional setup, and it's always nice to work with somebody who's got all their audio and everything working. When we first launched the show, it was back before, in the before times, before everyone was accustomed to Zoom and audio, and it was a little bit more challenging. It's become so much easier now because everyone's gotten used to hopping on Zoom and recording things online, and so a lot easier nowadays.
I agree 1,000%. Honestly, even with releasing my podcast, if it wasn't for that fact, I think I still would have invested in this equipment because it really works so much better when you're meeting and talking with people in this environment.
Yeah. So can you give me the 20/30 seconds of who you are? What do you do for those who aren't familiar with you?
Yeah. So again, Larry Sprung, I'm a founder and wealth advisor at Mitlin Financial. And I like to say that we help people become and remain financially independent. Essentially, we like working with families that are busy and time consumed, either at the younger end of the scale where they're busy working, taking care of kids, the household, or at the later end and later stages of life where they're busy enjoying their retirement and out and about with the grandkids and whatnot. And we come in and work with them and make sure that they're moving along towards their financial goals.
Love that. It's a clean, good value proposition. I typically start off with two opening questions. First one's the easier one, which is what comes to mind when you think about food? I love this. I love food. I'm a foodie. So I ask everyone, right? Like favorite food, something you make, whether it's or just an emotion that comes about, or what your last meal would be. I leave it open, but what first comes to mind when you think about food?
Well, I will tell you, I am a foodie. I love food. I will go out and have a nice dinner, even not a nice dinner, as long as the food's good. But I'll give you three quick answers. One is I could eat pizza every day. I think it covers all the food groups, and it's something that I really love. Two, sushi is one of my favorites. And then if I want to pick a specific meal, one of the best I ever had is Morimoto Asia at Disney Springs in Orlando. They have a Peking duck for two. And I must say, I ordered the Peking duck for two for myself.
Yeah.
It is that good. And I've been known while down there for conferences or family events to be there, to attend 1, 2, even 3 times during my stay because it is that good.
Wow. I love Morimoto, and his work and his restaurants. So I'll have to check that one out. I don't think I've been to the one down there. He has, I think it's still here, but he had a really great restaurant here in Philadelphia for a long time, which was one of his flagships early on. And, yeah, fantastic. But when you talk about pizza, do you gravitate to a certain style of the pizza world, right? Get into the pizza wars here. Are you a deep dish, thin crust, New York, more traditional Italian flatbread style?
Yeah, I'm a New York pizza guy all the way, and I like regular and Sicilian. They both have a great place at the right time. But New York pizza, man, there's nothing better than that. And one of the craziest pizza stories that I have is, there's a place in Westchester that we normally pass when I'm taking my kids to travel hockey. They usually play at this one rink in northern Westchester, and this pizza place up there, they literally have a 3-foot slice I mean, it's really that big, and it is unbelievable. It tastes good, and it's a little bit of a novelty too, but it's fun when you bring your, at the time, my 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, and the pizza slice is almost as big as them. It's kind of cool.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that was in Westchester, so I'll have to check it out. That's not too far from me either. And
Not Westchester, PA.
oh,
No,
yeah.
no, no. Westchester, New York. It is quite a distance
Yeah,
from
that's
you.
actually much further away
Yes.
then.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Now, I was thinking maybe you're driving through Westchester. I mean, that's obviously on the, you could go that way to Pittsburgh for hockey. So,
Well, there's plenty of rinks in Westchester that we play at in Westchester, PA. So we're there quite often. We were scheduled to go in a couple of weeks, but I don't think that's happening at the moment.
It does make sense why I don't know of this 3-foot pizza place then in Westchester, Pennsylvania, because it doesn't exist yet.
I'll get you the name for the one in New York. So if you're ever going through, you can stop by.
Good. Did you make your own pizza too? Do you guys do that at home or?
My wife loves doing that. She loves making, pizza on the barbecue, even buying the dough, flattening it out, and making homemade pizza. And it is phenomenal. Like I said, I could eat it every day, 3 meals a day. It wouldn't be a problem.
So to put Twitter back in a fit about this, do you guys use a pizza cutter or do you use scissors?
So it depends. What she tries to do is when she's making them on the grill, she'll make them like personal size. So you don't need either, which is great. You just pick up and go. When we buy the pies from the local pizza shop, my wife is a scissors. I'm a knife or a pizza cutter. So, we have a little bit of a difference of opinion there.
Yeah, I'm scissors all the way now. And it was fun. So one of we posted about this on Twitter, and then Chef Lauren Owens, who's been on the show before, was like she hadn't seen the scissors thing, and then one of the people who called me out on it, he then tried it and is like, I'm never going back from scissors now. It was so much easier. And he's like, and I can cut it to whatever size I want from a single slice. And he was like, it was great. And so he's all in for it.
I agree. But my wife's personal is nothing better. I love it. I love it. And you can make it however you want, which is, really good.
Cool. Well, next one, shifted off of pizza. Now I'm hungry, which is talk about your first money memory. So this is something, right? Advisors and people love to have this conversation. And I thought it's interesting to talk to people I look up to and hear about what their first money memory was, right? Was it from a place of trauma, a place of abundance? What was it for you?
Yeah, I think, looking back, my first real memory that comes to mind is when I was about 11 years old. I think that's when you could get working papers. I started a paper route, and, it really taught me a lot about sales. It also taught me about money and, being able to have money to spend, have money to save. And that was really my first experience. And then as I grew older, unfortunately, only a couple years later, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And, I tell this story pretty frequently. And I saw, I was not from a poor household. I wasn't from a really wealthy one either. We were a middle-class family. And I watched my dad, who was a New York City school teacher. And in addition to that, he worked a couple jobs. Sometimes he taught at night. Sometimes he also had a business of his own. So I watched him, struggle, so to speak, to make sure that everything was being handled for myself and my sister, making sure that, food was on the table, the bills for my mom's health, issues was covered. And, my dad and I used to get into these disagreements, I guess you could say. And I'd say, I wish we were wealthy, right? I wish we had money, more money. And he's like, money doesn't solve issues, wouldn't solve problems. I'm like, it wouldn't solve this issue. You're right. It wouldn't make mom healthy. It wouldn't make her well, but it might provide us access to other things that we might be able to try, other avenues. And it would make your life easier because you wouldn't have to worry about working 2 jobs or 3 jobs. So yeah, it's not going to create happiness, but it's going to solve some of those issues. And, that left a real impression upon me. And I think it really helped spearhead where I am today, because to some degree, one of the things I get a lot of joy in is helping families be able to navigate the financial landscape and not solve these issues, because you're not going to prevent somebody from getting sick or some kind of financial event, loss of a job. But with proper planning, you could kind of mitigate some of the impact that would be driven by some of those events. So it's very rewarding.
Yeah. I had these, somebody asked me this morning if I would start asking these questions to guests, right? Dr. David Roney was like, you should start asking this because I like this. And there was that book that came out, it's behind me somewhere, the How I Invest My Money or whatever that was called, that a bunch of the advisors put together.
Right.
And he's like,
Sure.
you should start asking when you have advisors on, two things: do they have their own financial advisor, and how do they invest today, right, in the market? And I thought both of those are interesting. Not all of my guests I'm probably going to ask that, but you are in both of those spaces, so I think it fits for you.
Yeah. So I do not have my own financial advisor, in full disclosure. I handle my money very similarly to the way I handle clients' money. My personal assets predominantly are in the same strategies that clients are. And we use that same philosophy, and I'm very open about sharing that. I tend to, with my investments, with regard to the markets, I tend to be a little bit more aggressive with those investments. And just because I have other investments that are not stock market or bond market related, real estate, for example, that I look as the bond portion of my portfolio. So if one of my clients were to look at my age per se and look at their age and then look at my portfolio versus theirs, they may say, wow, you're really aggressive. But if you start looking at the full picture, I think it gives a better story. And, I think that we have to eat our own cooking. If you really believe in what you're doing and how you're helping people, then we should be managing our money similarly to what we're telling and advising people to manage their money in the way that they are, or we are for them.
Yeah. Do you think at some point you'll get an advisor for you and your family too, or do you think you're just gonna keep managing kind of your own plan and money?
I don't know. Is that a common thing? I mean, I haven't ran into many advisors that have hired an advisor before. So I don't know. I mean, it's not even crossed my mind. So I guess my answer would be that really wasn't something that I would think about. What I have done is, just again, like we talk with clients, we're not experts, or I'm not an expert in every field. So, we rely on our relationships with, the Carson team, as well as the, my personal contacts from a standpoint of CPAs, estate planning attorneys, property and casualty, make sure we're covered from an insurance standpoint. So I rely heavily on them from a planning standpoint. So if that's what you mean by having an advisor, I definitely use outside advisors for them, just like I would recommend a client, if they were concerned about their risks or liability, we would bring in a property and casualty person to help review their situation. And I do the same.
Yeah. No, from my experience, which is, not the only experience out there by any means. It's not real common for advisors to hire another financial advisor. Not super common. Leveraging their insurance, COIs, the accountant COIs, the legal COIs to build out those parts of the plan. But I do think about it because, a large, I think, benefit of having, so I do, but I actually don't advise clients, right? So I'm not technically an advisor, but I have an advisor. And the reason wasn't because of myself, but I remember this, which I ran into an advisor, and he may have been the first one that I remember. And he had an over $1 billion shop, and, probably in his 70s at that point, and he brought up that he had an advisor and his process for vetting an advisor. And I asked why, and he goes, because my wife has literally never once cared about any of this. And he's like, and whenever I'm gone and I'm going to die before her, because, he's like, I'm overweight, I drink too much, I'm 10 years older than her, I'll be dead before her. He goes, I need somebody for that. And he's like, so I wanted to make sure that I hired somebody, right, that took care of my family just as I tell everyone else. So that was impactful for me. And I thought the same way, like, my wife's not really into the finances. Could she handle it? Absolutely. She's smarter than I am. She's an attorney. She litigates. But the way that we've kind of disseminated, household duties is like, I handle that because it's what I spend all my time thinking about. So I don't really talk to my advisor much, but I have somebody who like knows where all of our stuff is, right? Worked on a plan with me and would step in basically if I was gone. And that's kind of how I viewed it. But I just think it's an interesting conversation, but it's not real normal. Advisors don't tend to hire other like financial planner advisors. They do tend to work with the other specialists though, to kind of
right.
put the plan together. So
yeah, I think I think it's an interesting and valid point. I mean, if, at least having somebody who's going to know how to navigate that process. I think that, part of that can be done in the estate planning process, depending on who you're naming as the trustee or the executor or executrix, to make sure that they know where everything is, right? But it's an interesting point, and I think it's something you've opened my eyes to, and I may consider. I just don't know, it's kind of a weird situation, because if we're not going to utilize their services and just knowledge, I think we could probably solve a lot of that just by having another advisor that maybe I have a relationship with now that, would be the go-to person for her to contact if something were to go wrong.
And I think sometimes people just leverage their teams again, right?
Right.
Like, I think Ron said this, right? Like, he eats his own cooking. He says all that. And he invests back in the same stuff he's always told clients to. And he goes, that's why I built a firm that I would trust all of my wealth and my family to. And, sure. I think that's, maybe similar to you. You might also think, well, there's literally a firm here that could help in this situation, right?
Agreed.
People.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I get the point of that, that gentleman, the 70-year-old you mentioned, and it's certainly something to think about at this stage. I don't know that it's necessary, but I'll certainly keep it in mind. It wasn't anything I ever thought about before.
Hey, that's a good conversation then.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go to a little bit of your story. So, I mean, you gave us some great background about the family and some of the challenges there that obviously shaped, some of your views. When did you kind of realize that you were going to end up in the financial advisory space? Because rarely do you get, unless your parents were financial advisors, right? Do you get a 15, 16-year-old that says, I want to go be a financial advisor? You get people that say, I want to go work on Wall Street and then, end up in financial advising. But
right.
What did you think you were going to be, and how did you kind of progress into this career?
So the interesting thing is, I was just, and I'm going to fail on her name, but you just interviewed a guest that I had a similar story to, and that was, I was pre-med in college as well. So when I went to Binghamton University, I entered as a pre-med major. And, within a short period of time, within that first year, I started looking at, what life after college was going to look like as a pre-med major in medical school, and looking at the cost and the time commitment. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And I started saying, I didn't want to commit to that long of a time frame to schooling and to the financial commitment. So after my first year, I switched to a math major because that was what I had the most credits to. And unfortunately, at Binghamton, where I went to school, it was harder to get into the business school once you were in the college than coming in as a freshman. So I couldn't get into the business school. So I stayed a math major, and essentially it all clicked worked between my junior and senior year. I had to stay up for a semester for summer classes to make up some of that time that I had lost. And I ended up getting a job while I was up there going to school. And actually, a couple of months before the summer, one of my housemates came up to me and said, "Hey, my internship at Dean Witter," so I'm kind of dating myself now by saying Dean Witter, but which is now Morgan Stanley. But my internship's coming to an end, and the advisor's looking for somebody else. Is this something you'd be interested in? And I said, you know what? I've watched CNBC before. You know what? I'll do it. It'll give me exposure to a different area. So I took the internship unpaid. So I had to get a job as well for that summer. So I ended up getting a job at Denny's, which that lasted 1 hour. That job as a dishwasher. I have a lot of respect for dishwashers, and it's not something that I am good at, nor is in my personality. So I ended up leaving that, walking across the street, ironically, to get lunch, which I got a slice of pizza.
Oh,
and
okay.
and while I was there was a portrait studio that had a sign up that they were hiring salespeople. And I went in and they were looking for cold callers. So I interviewed right then and there, got the job, and I started selling portrait packages. Basically, they were called Watch Me Grow packages. Essentially, for $20, the family got a sitting every quarter, and they got one 8x10, and everything else, was an add-on. Mm-hmm. So I was selling those, and I, basically came to the realization, hey, I really like this internship at Dean Witter. I was really intrigued by the work and the advisory piece and the markets, et cetera. I really like this sales role as a cold caller for photo packages. And I started looking into financial advisory role, and it really kind of meshed the two together to some degree. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go down that path. And that's really what spearheaded me down the path. And then with my background with the family situation, it all really came together. I call it the hat trick, if you will, right? The three things, they all came together, aligned right. And, right out of school, I got a job with a financial services firm and haven't looked back since.
Well, I've got two things, and I'll let you pick. Right, it's the Choose Your Own Adventure series. I've got two follow-ups. Do you want to do more of I guess what I would say is the fun question first, or do you want me to do the more serious, timely question first?
Go with the serious. This way
All
we
right.
can end with the funny.
Yeah. So you brought up internships. It's become a hot topic again out there. And, the unpaid, right? I don't remember, maybe 3 or 4 unpaid internships in my life. And I didn't love not being paid for internships. You still took them because there actually aren't enough paid ones for everyone out there in the market. So like the market to some degree is not paying people. And but that's kind of come back up as a topic recently that, should you be paying your interns? And I'd love to get your take on that too. I have this mixed feeling, and I'll tell you, my gut feeling is like, I think people should get paid for their work. It actually, I think fundamentally, if somebody's doing something for you, they should be paid for time. Mm-hmm. But I also know that I took multiple unpaid internships, and at certain times too, like not too dissimilar from you, after I graduated, or like, I guess in college, I took some internships in the summer, but I always needed a job too. So I always balanced both, right? Like I'd mm-hmm. have kind of a professional internship, and I had to have a job because I couldn't get by without income, right?
Sure.
Like my parents couldn't just pay for my summer, and I couldn't just float around. So, I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah. So in full disclosure, although it was an unpaid internship, I did, I guess, convince a professor at the university to give me some pass-fail credits for the internship, where basically I had to write like a 4 or 5 page paper when I was done about the experience. So I guess to some degree I was paid, maybe in credits. I think money would have been better, but if I was paid in money, I may not have gotten the job with the photo studio and really came to the conclusion that this is where I wanted to be.
But remember, you were paying for those credits.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. but I got to do something I liked and wanted to do rather than sitting in a class that I didn't necessarily want to sit through, perhaps.
Yep.
But yeah, listen, as far as the internships go, my view is if the person is willing to do an unpaid versus paid, then I think it's a personal decision. But, we used to have, I used to have at my firm internships quite frequently, and we used to do it through the university and arrange for credits for them to do it. And, in recent years, we've been consulted by our employment attorneys that, basically, and I'm not sure if this is a federal thing or just a New York thing, but we've been told that unless they basically either have to be paid or there has to be a structured curriculum that the university approves of and that they're getting specific credits for that. So it's one or the other. So as far as we know and we're concerned, we can't really even do an unpaid internship if we want to. But I agree with you. I mean, these, I've had people here and I have paid them as part-time workers, and I have no problem doing that. I think people should be compensated for their time. And I think if, like you went through and like I went through, we had the internship, but we still had to work to earn money. Wouldn't it be better if you had, a potential employee or a potential member who could be part of your firm down the road? Wouldn't it be better if they could just dedicate their time and energy and effort to you, really learn the business, be compensated for it? And you never know, if you have a situation where they're a great fit, it might turn out to be something more even long term, where I think the unpaid thing doesn't give them as much dedication to it, doesn't give them as much interest. Unless they're really, really self-motivated, I don't know that you get them to that next level in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you of any of the places I internship for free. I didn't work at any of those.
Right. Right.
Right. Like, hey, that's not a good data example because it's one person like 4 times. But
well, we have 2. I did it twice too. So
so there we
same,
go.
Same.
All right, so we'll go to the more fun one that kind of came out of that conversation, which hopefully I'll remember now. Oh, hockey. You mentioned it, right? So tell us about your love with hockey, right? We did, you love it. You do a couple things around it.
Yeah.
When did you fall in love with hockey? And, kind of what are some of the fun things you do around hockey today?
Yeah. So, I mean, hockey's something that's been in my life since I was about 9 years old. I started playing, hockey at that age. I didn't even know how to skate. I basically woke up one day and told my parents I wanted to play hockey. My dad looked at me and said, "But you don't know how to skate." I'm like, "I'll learn." And started going for lessons and then started playing travel hockey. And I think at one point, because of the expense of hockey, I think my dad offered me on one of my birthdays a certain amount of money to stop playing. And I told him, no, thank you. But hockey has been a big part of my life for a long time. I played travel hockey. I played with some great guys along the way. Some of them have made it to the NHL. And have been part of that, and it's been great to be a part of it. And the community of hockey players, it's one of those things that there's this close-knit bond. I mean, I just ran into a couple weeks ago, I was at a rink and I ran into a guy that I played with like 35 years ago, and it was like we picked up like it was yesterday. And it's just amazing. And now I have 2 boys. They're going on 15 and 18, and they've played since they were 5 years old. And not my doing. They saw me playing as an adult in adult leagues, really took a liking to the sport, and have been playing travel hockey, for the better part of all their life at this point. And you meet a lot of great people, and hockey has taken me to a lot of places and meeting a lot of people that I normally wouldn't have. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to play for the Israeli national team as a guest player. They do some fundraising in the U.S., and they don't always get all their players to come. So I've had the opportunity to play with them. I've had the opportunity to play with some of the best New York Rangers around through different charitable endeavors and whatnot. And, one of the things that I've done as an outpost to hockey that, many of your listeners who know me on social media land probably have seen, is I've kind of spurred this whole thing called What Rink is Larry At? Because my kids are all over the country playing at different rinks. And it all happened because we posted a video of my son who basically took a penalty at the end of a close game, almost lost the game because of the penalty, and came out of the penalty box and scored a game-winning championship goal. And we basically put up a tagline like, hey, listen, when you do something wrong, all you have to do is fix it. Not everybody's perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Just fix it. And people started commenting about, oh, I know that rink. I know where you're at. And they started naming the rink. And we basically came up with this idea that every rink I go to, I film a quick 1-minute video and we put them up every so often. Now we're doing it on more or less a monthly basis. And it's guess what rink Larry's at. And they comment, they guess what rink I'm at, name their charity of choice. And at the end of the week, we take all the right answers and pull one winner and make $100 donation in their name. So we've created some philanthropy out of all the traveling I'm doing all over the country with my boys, which is great.
What charities do you guys usually go with, or do you mix it up kind of?
It's all based upon the person who's guessing. When you make the guess, you name your charity of choice. So we've made donations to the American Cancer Society, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Wounded Warrior, some very small charities. Actually, one of them that we made a donation to was the Peconic Hockey Foundation, which is out here on Long Island. They're trying to build a rink on the eastern part of Long Island. And as a result of that, I became a member of their board. So it was all spurred from What Rink is Larry At? And now I'm helping them raise funds and awareness to grow the game of hockey on Long Island.
So have you ever been laid out so hard in hockey that you had to guess which rink you were at?
The answer to that question is yes. And I can tell you exactly where, and it was actually in your state. I was playing college hockey. We were down in Penn State. It was during Penn State's homecoming weekend. And at that point, Penn State did not have a D1 team. They had a club team. And we were going down there to play them during homecoming weekend. There were about 3,000 or 4,000 fans that came to that game. And literally the Penn State hockey team, from what I remember, was basically a bunch of football players on skates. They were that big. And first shift, go out, and I got rocked pretty good. I mean, I don't even remember what happened other than I guess they scored. And next thing I know, we were lining up for a face-off, and the ref dropped the puck, and I saw 3 of them. And I skated over to the bench, and I looked at the coach, and I said, Coach, I saw 3 pucks. He goes, all right, you got 30 seconds, and then you're out next shift. This was all pre, head injuries and concussions and all that. Had I known what I know now, I probably would have left the game and would have been done. But back then it was like, hey, shake it off. You're out next shift. And I did have a headache for a day or so. So I probably did have a concussion. And I was probably trying to guess what rink I was at some point during that whole event.
Yeah, it's the old, let's just say, oh, you have a stinger, it'll be fine. And
things have changed.
They have changed. Like I only had one of those really in any of my sports things, and it was during a rugby match in college that I played in. And and it's funny enough, right? Like rugby, you get injured in an opposite way. Like it's, football, you typically think about like the person doing the tackling is injuring the other person. In rugby, it's almost always the other way around. Like you get injured when you make the tackle because you're usually kind of more standing still.
Right.
And I got absolutely rocked. And I don't, and just everything was fuzzy. Like I don't really remember the rest of the game. I know I stayed in, I know I kept playing. And I kind of remember like being in a shower like hours later. I don't really remember like much in between the two things, right? And
it was blurry.
It was just like a blur of like, I kind of remember the beginning of the game. And then I remember like standing in a shower. And what I remember very specifically was I didn't remember how long I'd been in the shower, right? Like I just I didn't know if I'd been in there 10 minutes or like an hour. And I was kind of like standing there being like, wow, I have no idea how long I've been in the shower.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, you probably would have never made it to the shower. You would have been at the doctor
Mm-hmm.
first,
Yeah.
but that's how things have changed. And it's definitely for the better because, we're protecting our bodies and our kids and ourselves.
Yep. Oh no, it's that is a huge improvement. Thanks to a lot of people's initiatives out there to bring awareness on that and actually keep kids safe long term. And same thing for me, right? Like I want to be as healthy and mentally with it for as long as I possibly can be. So that's important. Uh,
Agreed.
so tell me a little bit. We kind of hopped around a couple different places, but tell me a little bit about. I mean, you started beginning. Like, what do you do today? Like, why is this so important to you? From the financial advisor piece, and then I think we'll talk a little bit about, I guess, just kind of how you've run your practice, and you mentioned some charitable stuff, but you do other things. You've been involved with a lot of the industry groups, females in finance and things like that you've kind of committed back to helping and moving the profession forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I listen, from a practice standpoint, I find it very rewarding to help people. And, the financial profession, if you're not part of it, you're not ingrained in it every day, it is very confusing. There's confusing terminology, confusing language, there's confusing events. If you think about it, it's a cloud of confusion. So to be able to take some of that cloud and be able to mitigate it for people and be able to bring it down to a level that they understand and how it relates back to them is very rewarding. And be able to help them look for, plan for goals, and then working them towards those goals and then seeing them achieved at some point is even more rewarding. So it's a very rewarding profession. I think as long as you're working with the right people, you have the right team, the right clients, it just makes a recipe for a great life and a great environment for everybody. And again, it's very, very rewarding. And there are a lot of professions are rewarding, and they're all rewarding in different ways, but this is one that the reward is really something that resonates with me. Again, going back to, I guess, when I was a kid and seeing what my family went through and being able to help other families mitigate some of those ups and downs is awesome. It's something that I wake up every day to do. And then, in terms of the profession as a whole, being in this profession for now, again, dating myself, 25 years I'm going on since I left school and now have been a part of the profession. There comes a point where you want to make sure that this profession is left better off when you leave it, whenever that may be. I'm not leaving for a long time, so nobody get worried. None of my clients, don't worry. We're going to be here for a very long time, but you want to leave it a better place than it was when you got here. And, looking at the landscape, I've heard for a long time people talking about, the aging population of the advisor, the lack of diversity among advisors. And I think that these are areas, money is not just with 50, 60, and 70-year-old white people anymore. It's, everybody has part of the wealth and they deserve to get advice and guidance. And I think that our firms should reflect some of that diversity that's out in the world. And, I'm just looking to help make and move the profession forward, which I think we've done very slowly. I think there's some movement in the 25 years or 20 plus years that I've been here, but I think it could be better. And I think we're at a point where we need it to be better. And I'm trying to help, move it in that direction.
And so how do you take that in? I mean, you can support externally, which you mentioned, right? And there's a handful of organizations and movements in this financial services arena that I think are doing good things. You said it's probably all slower than anyone's liking. But how do you take that as a leader of a firm and instill that mindset into a firm too, right? Like that's equally as important. If every single firm instilled that mindset, right, then
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't have a problem
Right.
anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know that people have the same mindset that I do. So I think that's part of the hurdle right there, right? If you look at our firm, we have diversity in our firm and our employees. And, I've been asked, well, was that intentional? And it necessarily was not. It just was, I hired the best people for the role that I needed to hire for, regardless of anything. They were just the best fit and the most qualified, and I felt they were a great fit for the firm. So I think if more people took that type of approach, that, internally we would see that. And, from that, we don't judge anybody, who walks through our doors or who wants to work with us in any way, shape, or form. We are wanting to work with people that are a good fit for us, regardless of anything else. That's our hurdle, our criteria. And the first meeting that we have and the first conversation is called that. It's called, is there a fit? Because if there's no fit, then we're not going to be able to help them in the way that they need help. Then we're doing ourselves a disservice by taking them on as clients, because they're not going to be with us very long, and we're doing them a disservice because we're not going to help them do what they need to do. So I think if we took that type of approach, we could continue to move things forward. But all great things don't happen overnight. They happen slowly, but we need to start getting the momentum moving a little bit faster if we can.
Where did you come up? I mean, do you actually call the meeting that? Like, is it a fit? Like, is that how it's titled?
100%.
Where'd
100%.
that come from? I love that.
I think it was actually Duncan McPherson from the Pareto.
Yep.
I think it was, I had gone through some trainings and some of his coaching aspects. And that was one of the things that he, talks about a lot is there a fit, and basing everything upon there. And I think that, when we explain it to potential clients or prospective clients, they get it and they understand it. And if you put it, it could be off-putting if you say it the wrong way. But I think when you qualify it and quantify it by, hey, we want to make sure that we're able to solve the problems and help you plan the way you expect. And we don't want a relationship for the next year or two. We want a relationship for the next 1 or 2 decades, and if not more, and be the advisor to you, your kids and your grandkids. And by making sure that there's a good fit and a good baseline for us to springboard off of, that's the best way that we could put ourselves in that position.
Yeah, it's I like it. I don't call the meeting that, and I might now start using some of that. I'll think about it. But when I stepped into our coaching company, I added that to the onboarding process for, like, when we're talking to potential new people that want to join the community, is I have all of them talk to, between 1 to 2 coaches, or sometimes 3, it's even gone there, to make sure that they get along with them. Right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very similar thing. And it's how I've always positioned it. Look, I want to make sure that you feel that that's the right relationship for you, because you shouldn't sign up with any coach or anyone in that type of relationship that you don't want to work with, and that they don't want to work with you. Because I've had coaches that say, I'm not going to like working with that person. They
Mm-hmm.
said something on the call that is fundamentally different than how I view the world. And it will be a frustrating relationship for both of us because we're not going to agree.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, well, we need a different coach for them then.
Yeah.
And I've done that this past year. And I like that, the kind of terminology. I just say these are kind of intro calls, but I talk to people about it. It is about finding the right coach. And, I think it's a better way to do things. And I like that, taking that down to the client level on the advisor side is good too. Honestly, all the stuff that we do in our coaching is probably from a lot of those things too. I was like, Duncan came up on another call earlier today about coaching and some of the things we do and that we've done with them before. So it's funny that came up a second time today.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we even look at it like, we call it the caller ID test, right? You don't want to create a relationship where we're calling the client or the client's calling us, and our number comes up on caller ID or their number comes up on ours, and we're like, oh, not again. We don't want, we don't want a relationship with like that. We want a relationship where like, oh, wow, so and so's calling, let's pick up. We want to talk to them. How can we help them today? And that's really, where that fit comes into play.
So, who was your, I don't know why it popped in my mind. So who was your very first client? Do you remember? Do you still have them? Are they still a client?
They're probably not. So I had a weird path. So I kind of fast forwarded over it, right, a little bit. But my first role in the industry was really as a stockbroker.
Okay.
In the stockbroker world, if you will. Yes, it was at a firm that probably is in line with the Wolves of Wall Street and Boiler Room. But I learned a lot there. And, so those people I were working with are no longer clients today. It was an interesting learning experience being in that environment as a young 20 something and not really realizing what the industry was all about at that point.
Well, how about who was your first one that do you know who signed first with the current firm?
Signed with. So I came from a banking environment.
Yeah.
So I was with a banking program for a long time, but I have a couple of folks that are in that pool that were first clients, and
Okay.
we're still happy and proud to work with them today. In some cases, we're now working with the second and even the third generation of those clients, which is, it's amazing. We just sent out the client's great grandchild was just born, and we just sent out a baby gift to them today. As a matter of fact, it was like her fifth or sixth great grandchild. So that's great stuff.
That's pretty rewarding. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how do you approach getting new clients today? Are you more of a referral? I mean, because you do a lot of different things, right? Like you do social, you do community efforts, you give back to charity. You've got your podcast. You're tied into some of the Carson stuff on the marketing too. But so you've got clearly not only one approach to it. But what's kind of your core to how have you grown your clientele over the years?
Yeah, so I think the main couple of ways that we've done it is definitely referrals has been number one from existing clients and relationships that we have. And then the second is, and I kind of lump this all in one bucket, but it's a really big bucket, right? Is the social media and everything that we're doing out there. And what we've been seeing, which is really unbelievable, and I think it's partially to do with now, the age I'm at, I'm seeing that there are a lot of folks who, haven't reached out to us, thus far, but are now because, they've either been in a position where they've been following us for 10, 15 years, but they, the bulk of their money was in their 401k, and, the kids are going to school and everything's busy and they don't have a lot of discretionary money outside of that or investments. So they really didn't feel like they had any reason to talk to us. And we're seeing a really high influx of people now reaching out and for that reason, hey, I followed you for the last 10 years, never had any money to talk to you about that was worthwhile, but now I do. Maybe mom or dad passed away or a relative and they inherited some money, or maybe they've just at a place where their career is taken off and now they have a lot more discretionary income. So we're seeing a lot now coming through that social media almost equally to the referral base.
And so looking out longer term, kind of being cognizant of where we are on time. It's my only job in here.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you want the Larry legacy to be? What's the legacy that you want to have?
Yeah, so I don't, I can't write that whole script at this point because I feel like I have a long way to go for that, and a lot to change. But really, what I'm doing is a couple of things. Number one is I want to create a firm that is bigger than I am and that will outlive and outlast me. And we're actively looking to do that both from an organic and inorganic methods. So that's number one. Number two is I want to be known as one of the premier firms in the New York metropolitan area. And number three, when all's said and done, I want people, when they think of me and think of my firm, I also want them to think about all of the charitable endeavors that I did, that I wasn't just a business guy who was here trying to build the business, create a nice life for his family, but he was also somebody who cared about others and was willing to give back, whether it's to the work I've done with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and in my brother-in-law's name, or it's the work that I've done for Peconic Hockey or any of the other charitable endeavors, females in finance in our industry, whatever it may be. I want to be more than, hey, he was an investment guy. What do they say? Well, on your tombstone, you have the 2 years and the dash, and everybody concentrates on the years. I want that dash to really be the most impactful when people think about me and my legacy.
I mean, do you want to share, why the suicide prevention piece is so important to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I lost my brother-in-law in 2004. He suffered from bipolar disorder, and he died by suicide in 2004. Actually, about a month before I launched my firm and went out on my own. And there was some conversation around whether or not I would do that. But my wife said my brother-in-law would want me to, and we went forward with that. And I learned a lot. When I started learning that, I never thought that mental illness, anxiety, depression could lead to loss of life. And it was an eye opener for me. And then I started learning about that we lost as many people, like at that time, it was about 37,000 people a year to suicide versus the same number of people to breast cancer. And they're all great causes. They need funding, but breast cancer was getting funding in the billions, who I lost my mom to breast cancer, and, suicide prevention in the millions. So I became a very big advocate, and I think there have been a couple of great results out of it. One is, I sit on the national board of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which we're doing great work. My wife and I, with the help of a lot of great people around us, have been successful in raising over $1.5 million for the organization personally. And I think the most rewarding part is my wife and I have become somewhat quasi resources for people in our community and through social media land, that when they're either having an event issue or a family member is, they reach out to us. And I know for a fact that we've helped people through some really tough spots and even saved a life or two because we've guided them in the right direction. So, all great things. And, hopefully one day my legacy will be that we put the AFSP out of business, because the suicide rate is zero. That's my biggest hope.
Yeah, the numbers there are always shocking when you look at them. And I think that, people, I think are aware of a little bit better probably today, mental health, depression, suicide awareness than they were 20 years ago, right? That's probably gone a long way. But the numbers are always still shocking to me. I remember I was teaching a life insurance law class, and we were talking about, the suicide provisions that are typically in life insurance contracts, right?
Sure.
And I remember just, looking up the data as I was working on that textbook. And, at that time, that was probably 2013-ish timeframe. And that was right around when, because you have one going down and one going up. So, right, suicide somewhere back in that time frame past car accident deaths, right? Mm-hmm. Because car accident deaths, generally speaking, have been in kind of more of a downward trend, at least as a percentage of the population.
Safety.
Too.
Yeah.
It got better, and you actually, had that pass over, and it was at 38,000 or something in that range. And that was kind of shocking, because you literally, right, every day you do a couple things to make sure that you don't die in a car accident.
Right.
Right. And then you stop and think about that. And I said, do you really do a couple things every day to make sure somebody else doesn't commit suicide, though? But you absolutely take precautions every single day to make sure somebody's not going to die in a car accident. Right. And you would reach out to somebody and intervene if you knew that there was a higher risk, right? Easy example, sure. If somebody was drunk, you would say, hey, you probably shouldn't drive. but would you reach out if you knew somebody was depressed and say, hey, like, are you okay? Right. And I thought that was really impactful for me as a different way to look at it right then, right? Is like how we react. And you brought up, breast cancer awareness and how many, how much money gets donated there, where there's other diseases. Alzheimer's is a similar one. Doesn't have nearly as much funding going towards it, but right, again, it impacts so many people.
Right.
And I think it's just a change of perspective sometimes when you actually start looking at some of these numbers. And I worry about that right now. I think I saw some of the numbers at the end of 2020 with the, isolation and concerns about, suicide, depression, that, I think we had the most Americans ever that said that they were the highest stress levels, right. At the end of 2020. And so hopefully that starts coming down in 2021, but concerning numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the 2020 suicide rate, they actually was lower. I'm sorry, the 2019 numbers came out in the end of 2020, which showed a decline from 2018 to 2019. And, I'm a little uncertain at this point, when we'll see when the numbers come out at the end of 2021 for 2020. But, I'm a little unsure if it's a situation where we're seeing people that are there are more depressed people, more people dying by suicide, more anxiety, or if it's a situation where we're just reporting a whole lot more about it, because the numbers could actually be going down. But if we're reporting more about it, and it sounds like we are, is it really? So
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know what the answer is, but the numbers will tell us what that is. But, I definitely have a level of concern there as well, because of the environment we're in, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess, thank you for the work that you're doing there. It's incredibly important. And, for being committed to a positive change there. We've touched a lot of topics today, from pizza to hockey to financial advice to the Wolf of Wall Street. I heard mentioned in there once, suicide prevention, changing the profession. So this was really great. Last thing is always great, right? Which is just what's the best place for people to follow you, reach out, interact with you. So as I say, all the self-promotional, where do you exist?
Yeah, I mean, we're all over the place. So, I mean, websites, mitlinfinancial.com, Mitlin. Our podcast is Mitlin Money Mindset. If you want to hear some great guests, including Jamie, he's going to be coming up on the show. And then Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Feel free to, just put in my name or Mitlin, and you'll find us there. And I'd be happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, actually, before I let you go, who's been your favorite guest that you've ever had on your show? It's not me, but I mean, you've had some pretty cool people, some NFL players, some hockey players, right?
So I think one of the coolest was actually the episode that we just released this week. Was I interviewed the guide that I had when I went on safari in South Africa. He's just a really cool guy. He enjoys skydiving. He enjoys wingsuit jumping and base jumping, which we put up some videos with that. So real interesting guy that, not really well known. And I just recently, in the episode has not gone live just yet as of today, but I got to interview the first female player that ever signed a contract with the NHL. She played for the Tampa Bay Lightning in 1997. And, we've had just some cool guests. It's a lot of fun interviewing some really great people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Larry, I love the time today. I know the listeners will love it too. So I really appreciate everything you're doing, and for joining us this week on the Framework Podcast.
Awesome, Jamie. Thanks for having me, and make it a great day.